Good day, and you're welcome. You're tuning into another episode of the Rashad Grove Show. So glad to have you all with me. We're powered by Star Child Media Enterprises, executive produced by the great Brandy Briz Grove. And thanks to my boy SP Methods for that banging instrumental in the intro and outro. Thanks for that. Listen, man, another episode. Make sure y'all subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can catch these on Facebook as well. Follow me at the Groveness on all your social medias. Make sure you tap in with the show. Got some cool stuff coming. But today, we're gonna put our music hats on, and we're gonna talk about the best rap albums from 1996. 1996. 30 years ago. That time flew. It feels like yesterday when I was just 14 years old, having the time of my life, musically speaking. That was a seminal year, a shift in the culture. That's when hip hop and R&B were the dominant genres on the charts. Uh, Early 90s, it was pop and rock music, but the record sales and all of the cultural shifts were taking place were because black music was really taking over the scene, and it's evident what we see today as hip hop, rap music, and the like are dominating all across the globe. It really began in the mid '90s, in 1996 particularly. Played a big role in that, and some of the best albums, timeless classics. I was going to do a top 10, but it was so many, and I couldn't nail down uh a top 10. It was really like about 20. So I'm going to mention some and do a deep dive into others. One more time for all you music aficionados, come at your boy's neck. I'm going to mention a few and do a deep dive into another select few. But 1996, man, it was an incredible time to be a music lover, and some of the greatest albums were dropped, and a lot of them are having their 30th anniversary. I wrote a piece about the Fugees album, which we'll talk about later. A few years ago for OK Player, shout out to them. Uh, and I got to interview Salam Remy, who produced Fuji La, and he produced a lot of bangers from the 90s, including Mike Scott's classic Mac Daddy, which is one of my favorite songs of all time, all the Philly Clubheads. We love that song. Salam Remy was just breaking down what was happening and all the things that was taking place during that era that caused such a spike in record sales, and some of these great albums and legends were made. And listen, in 1996, for the majority of that year, all the great ones are on the scene. Notorious B.I.G. just dropped Ready to Die in 1994, penned much of Conspiracy, the Junior Mafia album, 1995, and he's prepping for Life After Death, that album, which would drop in 1997. Tupac Shakur just released in 1995, Me Against the World, several movies. He's on the scene. He's going to be joining Death Row in 1996, who've already been dominating the scene with Snoop Dogg, already dominating the scene with a much slept on album, Dog Food by the Dog Pound, one of my favorite albums. I think it's one of the most slept on great albums of that era. So Tupac is coming to Death Row with Dr. Dre, Suge Knight, and Nate Dogg, and that whole roster over there. Nas is on the scene, transitioning from the poet who dropped arguably one of the greatest hip hop albums and debuts, probably so. I would vote for that. And Illmatic in 1994. He's rebranded himself in 1996, trying to reach a bigger audience in 1996 as he prepares to drop It Is Written. And Jay-Z, who is a local, you got to be in Philly, Maryland, D.C. to really know who he was back then. He's preparing to drop his debut album as well after having a big hit, Ain't No. from Nutty Professor soundtrack. So all this is taking place, and not to mention the Outcasts who blew us away in 1994. They're working on uh, next project in 1996. So all this is happening. All the regions are being represented. So we're gonna dive into some of the top albums in 1996. I needed some notes today. It was so much going on. These are the albums that were very good and great that I will mention, and I'm gonna give them as a reference points to y'all who may have forgot, or those who wasn't outside back then and want to do your Googles and research. Listen, Rascas, Soul on Ice, an incredible lyricist. He's like the West Coast Black Thought. Them two, I love to see them on the track. The Soul on Ice, what a great debut album. That single, Soul on Ice, Nature of the Threat, uh, his skillful lyricism from the West Coast. Rascas's album is a great one to check out from 1996. Also, one of my favorite groups, the Lost Boys, dropped their album, Legal Drug Money. Yo, music gets me high and get up, clap your hands, and Renee. Oh my God. It goes on and on. I always used to love the Lost Boys back then. The Coming, Buster Rhymes. Ooh, I dropped, and It's a Party with Janae, and he featured a lot of production from Jay Dilla. Great album from 1996. Lord Finesse dropped his second project, The Awakening. Shout out to Lord Finesse. I got to party with him in Memphis. Shout out to you too, Big Said. That was a blast. One of my favorite producers and MCs of all time. Punchlines for days. That a lot of that style comes from Lord Finesse. Also, Bow Down, West Side Connection. I'm a big Ice Cube guy, so I was down with whatever they was doing, whatever he was doing at that time. You know, they was going that Common, that beat was happening, and Bow Down with Dub C and Mag 10. That was a great West Coast album in Cube's second group after leaving WNBA and Lynch Mob. He founded West Coast, the West Side Connection with Mac 10 and Dub C. Great album to check out, a West Coast classic indeed. Foxy Brown's Il Na Na, I'll Be Good with Jay Z, and the title track Il Na Na with Method Man. The track masters are in their bag on that one, especially with Gotta Get You Home with Me Tonight. That might be one of my top 5 songs from that year and that era. That is a showcase and a display of how hip hop and R&B were merging in a great way. Not just a gimmick, not just a one-off, but really creating a classic. Gotta Get You Home with Me. I'm gonna listen to that today with Foxy Brown featuring Blackstreet. Also, another banger that year, Stakes is High by De La Soul. Oh my God, I was listening to that on Saturday preparing for the show and listening to that. That's one of my favorite songs. That's my favorite Jay Dilla track right there. That is a masterful production. And Paz and thank you, Dave, R.I.P. Dave and Mace and the crew. They were in their bag. That was the first album they made without the production of Prince Paul, who produced Balloon Mind, Stakes, 3 Feet High and Rising, and De La Soul is Dead. So they made a shift as well as the native tongues and the collective, the more conscious rappers at the time were dealing with the shift as well. But So Easy and the Business featuring Common, so many cuts on that De La Soul album. De La Soul always made great albums. But here's the ones we're going to take a little deep dive into. My favorite of the year, even back then, uh, my other podcast, shout out to my boy Adam Carter AC, where we cover NBA politics as usual. We grabbed that from my favorite song from Jay Z's masterpiece of a debut, Reasonable Doubt. It was a slow cooker. You had to be outside to really understand what was happening. It wasn't a big seller. It was a if you know you know kind of album, and Jay Z was that kind of artist in 1996. He had a big hit with Ain't No. That was a big hit with Foxy, probably top 20 on the R&B on the Hot 100s. But so he was getting some recognition on MTV at the time. But yo, his skills and the production on that album and he sounded like a grown man. Remember, he was 26 when he dropped that, which was rare because rap was such a young person's game at the time. But the cuts are unbelievable. Skis on the production, DJ Premier, RIP to the great Clark Kent. I got the party with him right before he passed away, who produced Cashmere Thoughts and uh, It's Time to Come Up with Memphis Bleak. Coming of age. There's so many because, of course, Politics as Usual, as produced by Ski, is my favorite cut on the album. But Jay Z's skills and his metaphors and his couplets. And shout out to us, Sharon Hogarth and Adam and Ketch and Daryl Johnson. When we was in high school, we was the Hove guys at the time, Jigga. Everybody else was loving all the other rappers, and that's when Jay Z was right before he was gonna blow up. We was listening to the Jay Z mixtape, and he was dropping remixes with Horace Brown and Shy. But he was on the come up. So Reasonable Doubt is it's not Jay Z's biggest album. It's my favorite of his because lyrically, and he was just dropping gems, the evils and can I live, and the phrases we still say today. Can I live? That is a seminal album right there. It's one of the best debuts of all time. And if you want to know pre lock in his hair, pre billionaire, the mafioso hustler style, Jay Z's Reasonable Doubt is an undeniable classic. Dropped in June, and he dropped Dead Presidents on streaming services for the first time this week in celebration of the 30th anniversary of the album. Dead Presidents and Can't Knock the Hustle with Mary J. Blige, Feeling It, 22 Twos. I can go on and on. Y'all know I can. So that is one. That's a masterful album right there. Oh, how can I forget Brooklyn's Finest with Biggie? Probably the best back and forth track out there. That's a masterful album right there. Reasonable Doubt, 1996. Also, it was written. It was written. Listen, if you was outside in 1996 in that summer, we watched Nas go from just an ill lyricist, the second coming of Rakim, to a legit superstar. Dude was on MTV. Remember the Street Dreams video that was on MTV and BET all the time. But that single with Lauryn Hill, If I Ruled the World, we were singing that in the parks all summer. It was written, really was an expansion and a growth for Nas. And at the time, he took a lot of flack from it because it wasn't like Illmatic, but he wasn't trying to be that no more. He grew. He was Nas Esco. He had the firm with him now with AZ, Foxy Brown, and Cormega. Affirmative Action, great cut from the album. Watch them that be close to you. Make sure they do what they supposed to do. I used to bang that the whole summer. Also, the track Street Dreams, and he was working with the track masters as well. But I Gave You Power with DJ Premier, where he imagines himself as a gun. It's an incredible storytelling track right there. But I was just playing Silent Murder last week and Shootouts and so many songs, and he has an appearance by Dre. Nas is Coming. Not my favorite song. When I look back at it now, if you take that song out, I think It Was Written is right up there with Illmatic. But yeah, that's a masterpiece of an album. It Was Written, and those of us who were maybe hard on Nas back then, saying it was too pop, it was too commercial. Nah, dog. He nailed it with It Was Written. So let me know in the comments what y'all think about those two. Reasonable Doubt, It Was Written. And Tupac Shakur was not playing in 1996 at all. But the back end of Death Row, he dropped the hip hop's first double album, All Eyes on Me. So much. Listen, it seemed like he made that album in 2 weeks. You know, he got in the studio, took over everybody's beats, everybody's sessions. And I remember Snoop Dogg saying he taught us how to work in a different way. Because, you know, working with Dre, the perfectionist, they may be working on a song for a week or a month. And Pac was dropping them songs. They said 3 or 4 songs in a day. Just taking tracks. Johnny J's producing on there, giving us the classics like "Picture Me Rolling" and title track "All Eyes on Me," both featuring Big Sight. Oh yeah, we used to knock those songs. But my favorite on there is "Ambitious as a Rider." I love that track. Shout out to a slept on producer, Daz. Daz from the Dog Pound. He was producing some major cuts over there. Hearts of Men, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was produced by DJ Quick. Yo, Only God Can Judge Me, and so many cuts on that double album. One of the greatest double albums, and that joint probably is well over diamond. And not only did he drop that in 1996, but 7 days, 6, 7 days after his passing in September '96, they dropped Machiavelli, originally slated to be a mixtape. But before we get there, one of the greatest cuts of all time is Got My Mind Made Up. Tupac, Corrupt, slept on lyricist. He drops an ill verse, probably my favorite verse on there. Red Man, Method Man, and Ines the Rebel. You hear him on the end, but Tupac cut off Inspector Deck on that joint. Another production, if I'm not mistaken, by Daz. But that was a mean cut. You know, in that era, the mid '90s, all the way up to the early 2000s, those cuts, those posse cuts, for lack of a better word, was the ticket. And that is a slept on one. We always talk about Banned from TV or You, Me, Him, and Her with The Rock or even Affirmative Action. But Got My Mind Made Up with Pac and Red and Meth and Corrupt. That's a banger. But yeah, so Tupac Shakur, after his murder, they released Machiavelli the Don, Illuminati, 7 Day Theory. I remember we was on the bus and Don Buchanan had the bootleg, and we listened to me and my girlfriend from Coast Street all the way to school on repeat. I was like, this is it. You know, you and Pac's got the vitriol. He's upset. He's mad. And he's coming at Biggie, Jay-Z, Nas, Mom D. It was the height of what I believe was fueled by the media, the so-called East Coast, West Coast beef. And now being in the media, I know how easily writers and creators now can have an impact on narratives. We was watching what was going on at Vibe and the Source and just reading. We didn't have no social media, but just watching this unfortunately unfurl into the passing of Tupac was a tragedy because we not only lost a great rapper, who knows what the skill set and all the gifts he had for acting and writing and poetry, man. He would have been an amazing artist right now. But me and my girlfriend, just like Daddy. Oh my God, I still love that song. And Hail Mary, To Live and Die in L.A., working with QD3. At that time, Tupac was with Quincy Jones's daughter. They were a couple, and her brother QD3, who also was creating the Beef series that used to come on BET a lot. He did a lot of production on that album, but he was the first rapper to have two #1 albums in the same year. All Eyes on Me, and then Machiavelli. That all happened in 1996. Just those 4 albums alone, Machiavelli, All Eyes on Me. It was written, and Reasonable Doubt would have made the year classic, but there's so many more albums that dropped. AT Aliens, 1996. Come on. Me and You, Your Mama and Your Cousin Too. That hook alone and that verse by Dre was picked as one of the top 10 verses in the Source in the late '90s. I was a Source head. Uh, that verse, that last verse by Dre, is when he really was stepping into his own as a real ill lyricist, really unique lyricist. And it's no shade to Big Boy, because you remember Big Boy used to get all the features. He's on All in My Grill. He's on with Missy. He's on the joint with Slick Rick. So Big Boy used to get really get the features first. But Those two, they're great by themselves, but they're a force when they're together. Outkast, AT Aliens, another classic album. Jazzy Bell, Elevators, that production team down there, the Dungeon Family, another banger, and the sound they created. They didn't have a lot of scratching and boom bap, live music, live instrumentation, and we see their Afrofuturistic vibe that they was dropping on us. AT Aliens, another undeniable classic that dropped in 1996 and really solidifying the South and Atlanta as a major hub of hip hop, major hub. It was a foreshadowing of what was to come probably less than a decade later. He told us that the South had something to say, and he wasn't lying. But one of my favorite albums to drop from that era is Little Kim's Hardcore. And if we was outside then, everybody had that poster, wanted the poster, was hiding that poster of Lil Kim. Lil Kim, I think this album, Hardcore, I love how it was produced. JD's on there, Nasheem Merrick produces one of my favorites, Queen Bee on there. A Big Mama Thing with Jay-Z. And this album is everything we see with Glorilla, Nicki Minaj, yikes, Cardi B, Meg Thee Stallion, uh, Lotto, all of that comes from Lil Kim. Lil Kim with her overt sexuality, but she know how to make bangers. Crush on You remix, on the album is just Lil C's written by Cameron, but throwing Kim on there, another banger. No Time was a banger. Not Tonight, the remix featuring rest in power to Lisa Left Eye Lopez, Angie Martinez, the Brat and Missy, a banger. Lil Kim dropped a classic. Hardcore is a watershed moment, definitely for women MCs at the time. Now we have so many to choose from. Doshi and Doja Cat, Rhapsody. You have so many women to choose from. It's a good 2025. I can name so many. I've interviewed so many of them. Back then, it was just a few. And Little Kim stood out. Her and Foxy at that time dropping debut albums. Get this, a week from each other. Kim dropped first, and Foxy dropped in that same year. As next week we'll talk about the best R&B albums. Uh, they're on their only appearance together is on that the Total song. I Don't Need No One But You to remix also with the Brat on there. Hardcore, another album that dropped in 96 that was just incredible. Mobb Deep was back after dropping the Infamous in 1994 or 95, following year, and come back with Hell on Earth. And that album, of course, the Tupac disc Drop a Gem on them was on there. Extortion with Method Man, but God Father Part 3, the production of Habit, we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about how ill Prodigy's voice was and how, like Rakim, he has some of the best opening lines in the history of hip hop. They dropped another classic with Hell on Earth. Incredible album. Uh, those cats from Queens and Queensbridge, yo, Hell on Earth is a banger. Mobb Deep dropped a great one with Hell on Earth. Listen, we keep going all day. Outside of Reasonable Doubt, right even. My favorite album that dropped that year, Ghostface Killer's Iron Man. Ghostface Killer, his discography is incredible, man. He's probably got about, I would say, 4 or 5 classics, and the rest of them are very good to great albums. And he kept that momentum of Wu Tang's solo debut projects. Remember, it was Method Man to Cal, and the Genius Liquid Swords, incredible album. and the dirty version of the 36 Chambers ODB. And he was fresh off the heels and the momentum of the Purple Tape Classic, Raekwon. So his energy and his vibe, Ghostface, he was ready, and he did not disappoint with Iron Man. One of my top songs of all time. Great sample of Bob James's Mardi Gras. Uh, was Daytona 500, and the RZA, fourth master, fourth disciple, true master, contributed as well. Those tracks on Iron Man are incredible. Cam May and All That I Got Is You. What an album, man. I'm telling you, man. Iron Man, those albums have aged so well. Not some of the content, some of it's problematic now, because we know a little better. But the lyricism and the songwriting, Iron Man, Tony Stark's, I'm telling you, man, that was a debut. And to find out that he doesn't even think that's a good album, as he was doing the rollout earlier last year for Supreme Clientele 2, that's insane, man. We love Iron Man. Shout out to Ghostface Killer. What a great album from 96. If you're from the Philly area, you're from Philly, you were watching Ed Box and Roz on Urban Expressions every Saturday night, public access show. And they would always play Clones, Desperado, Concerto Desperado. They was in the intros of the show, they would always play the Roots music. And the Roots that year dropped one of their finest albums, Philadelphia Half-Life, and Black Thought, and R.I.P. to Malik B, the production of Questlove and the band. I believe Scott Storch had a hand in a lot of that as well. And the songs I just listed, Concerto of a Desperado. Also, you had where they were mocking hip hop culture and all the Versace and what would go on to be the shiny suit era, if you will, all the bling and all this, the materialism. They wasn't feeling that, and they drive Never Do What They Do, mocking everything. That's a classic video. We used to sing that all the time in class. With Raphael Sadiq on there. I was listening to that album as well, preparing for the show. Fantastic album, incredible. Black Thought is one of the most underrated MCs of all time, and he's still an all-time great. But he doesn't get enough credit. We know he can spit freestyles and he can do what we see him on Jimmy Fallon's show. But for his songwriting and album making for over 30 years of consistent progressive lyricism and songwriting, doesn't get enough credit for it. Philadelphia Half-Life, Quest, and the rest of the Roots, classic from 1996. Do your Googles on that. Muddy Waters by Redman. First of all, I got to meet Redman a couple weeks ago at Do It All's birthday party. Shout out to Chanel for getting me up in there, and had to have a conversation with him. We exchanged numbers. He remembered I interviewed him for Muddy Waters 2. But Muddy Waters in 1996, whatever, man, with him and Redman. Oh, that was a banger. Rock the Spot, On Fire. It's like that with K Solo. I recorded that off the radio. That was a banger right there. Production was on fire by Red, Eric Sherman, and Rock Wilder. Muddy Waters, and I think he's another one. And it's great. They recently had a conversation together, him and Black Thought, about their status as MCs. They are some of the most underrated, slept on all-time greats. Redman's Muddy Waters was his third classic album, I would argue, after there's a Dark Side and What the Album in 92, I believe. There's Dark Side in 94, and coming in 96 with Muddy Waters, fresh off of How High with Method Man. That is an album, Muddy Waters, for sure. Coming to the stretch run. Took a little longer than I thought. But in Texas, there's this group called UGK. They dropped Riding Dirty in 1996. And I'm going to be honest with you. I wasn't up on UGK. Jay-Z had a lot to do with us from the Northeast learning about UGK. I remember him in an interview in '97, just talking about this album, how he loved it, and how he dug UGK. But I really listened to it this week. First of all, the production is so funky from Texas. They're so musical, and the lyricism. Bun B, who I got to meet and talk to, great lyricism. Him and Pimp C's there, they are top five rap duo of all time. You got to put them in there. And it starts with this album here, really them representing this new era of Southern Houston, Texas rap. We all know the Ghetto Boys and Scarface, but they came with a new sound, a new perspective, and Riding Dirty is a classic. And that whole riding dirty, all that lingo comes from them. Some of the cuts I really like: Murder, Pinky Ring, Touch, That's Why I Carry. Pimp C is unmistakable voice, and RIP to him. And we would come to know them later on Big Pimpin' and Sipping on Scissor and the joint with Outkast, I Choose You, and all that. But their genesis, their origin story to us who didn't grow up in those areas and didn't know began on Riding Dirty. So I want to thank y'all today for watching. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to the Rashad Grove Show. And we'll see you back Friday at 1 p.m. with a new interview. Who is it? I can't tell you yet, but make sure you tune in. And I thank you all for watching.